John, I'll come to you first. You have a very different opinion on Thomas Massie than certainly me and perhaps some of our other guests. That's why I wanted you here. Help us understand why I'm wrong and we are better off with a Congress that does not include Thomas Massie.
Well, I guess it depends. I don't think that you and I are exactly aligned politically. And so I think even embarking from first principles, we may run into some trouble here. But I just think that the reason that the country has been so upended in the past few decades is because of the sort of political hegemony of the Democrat Party. I view Donald Trump and his administration, especially his second administration, to be a unique opportunity to perhaps correct some of that. And I look at characters like Thomas Massie, who I really have no personal issue with. You know, I remember when I was in high school, I think Thomas Massie used to be my phone background or something, sort of the remnants of like the Tea Party libertarian era. And I had a lot of respect for the guy, but it seems to me that in the past few years, he was happy to kind of make himself an avatar for right-wing opposition to the presidents, which I just don't think is useful or productive. And I don't know if I could speak to whether what's really on his mind or what's really in his heart, because I don't know that, but I ultimately disagree with the way that he's choose to conduct himself. And I think that the voters in Kentucky reflected that as well. And so I am happy that he's out insofar as it means that we don't have a model on the right wing for being successful in politics while being in vocal opposition to the president, because
when the president's trying to hide the names of kid touchers that are in our government.
Think that the reason the Democrats are so effective at governing is because they are always in complete lockstep with each other. There is no meaningful dissent on that side of the aisle. And insofar as there is, those people are not rewarded with book tours and media tours and other positions. On the right, we don't have that. On the right, if you are actually dissenting from the president, you can be rewarded, typically within a left-wing media infrastructure. And so I think that's why we're bad at winning. And so, yeah, I would like to win. And so I'm glad that Thomas Massie is no longer going to be able to be in a position where he can be a meaningful disruption to MAGA.
Well, Chris, I
until the presidential election,
imagine you have thoughts on whether Democrats are all just actually in lockstep. Maybe speak to that briefly, then give us your take on Thomas Massie, because I'm guessing you probably kind of enjoy watching Republicans all fight amongst themselves, but you probably did appreciate him on at least a few issues like the Epstein files.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And to start with Democrats being in lockstep, that certainly is not the case. Democrats have a host of issues. Congressional Democrats right now are the most unpopular they've been.
I'm not too familiar with this Chris Mulry guy, but I do believe he's part of the whole Harry Sisson and like the TikTok debaters, that little group of liberals.
Been ever in American history. So Democrats, after the 2024 election, really still trying to figure it out. And I heard John say that you're rewarded if you go against the president of the United States and the Republican Party. But on the left, we're all just in lockstep. I mean, that's no different than saying I'm 6'8" and I play for the Los Angeles Lakers. It's absurdity. And that relates to the realities of last night, which is that, we very clearly see that this party is a party of loyalty to the president of the United States. That's it. Donald Trump has dominated and had an iron grip on this party for 10 years. I think we all kind of were trying to see how long that would last. We started to see cracks in that. And I think a lot of us were hoping that Thomas Massie would win. I probably disagree with Thomas Massie on 99% of issues. But again, I appreciate the fact that he hasn't just sold his soul and all his values to the president of the United States, who is the most expensive House primary in American history. Donald Trump and all the people dumped as much money as they physically could to make sure there was somebody who was loyal to the president in that space. And that's what happened.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why I'm disappointed is I don't want congressmen who are loyal to the president.
Yeah.
But Dave, I mean, you're obviously more from the libertarian camp. You've been a longtime admirer of Tom.
It's almost like these people don't understand there's supposed to be a separation of state. Like if you're just the same as the president, what's the fucking point?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm disappointed is I don't want congressmen who are loyal to the president. But Dave, I mean, you're obviously more from the libertarian camp. You've been a longtime admirer of Thomas Massie. Are you surprised by this? I mean, I'm sure you're not happy about it.
Oh, sure. Well, I mean, I'm Thomas Massie. I probably align with him politically more than any other member of the House of Representatives. So I'm certainly not happy to see him defeated. I don't know that I'm surprised. I'm glad that it was mentioned there right at the end. It felt like we were going to get through a lot of this just talking about whether it was like Trump has an iron grip on the Republican Party. I've seen everyone from Jake Tapper to Ben Shapiro and trying to spin that as like Donald Trump's just so much more popular with the Republicans. But the bottom line is that they had to put more money money into this congressional race than has ever been put into a congressional primary in the history of the United States of America to unseat the guy. So it's not, they very clearly knew that just Donald Trump endorsing his opponent and calling him the worst congressman in history wasn't going to be enough. And so you had a massive effort to unseat the guy for essentially the crime of pushing for the Epstein files being released and opposing the war in Iran. These were two explicit promises that the Trump administration ran on: no new wars and disclosing the Epstein files. So
both very Israeli issues too, right?
I certainly think there's no justice in it from that perspective. But, you know, I got to say, I think from my perspective, there's a real silver lining to this, which is that I think they've essentially made Thomas Massie a political martyr. And the way that the support for him breaks up between generational divides is really something. I mean, Thomas Massie is one of, if not the most popular political figures in America amongst young people. And it was only because of
amongst people with an IQ over 25 or so,
the Israel lobby money and the Fox News apparatus, which is the media that boomers still can consume, that they convinced enough boomers in his district that he was like a Democrat now or had completely changed his principles, which is ridiculous and not true. And just one comment on I hear this as a talking point on from Republicans a lot, that there's like no division amongst the Democrats and that they just are all in lockstep. And I just really think this couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, in both 2016 and 2020, the Democratic establishment essentially had to put down a mutiny from Bernie Sanders, which had all the energy and all the young people, and they had to cheat. They had to lie and cheat to get rid of him, to even get their nominees across the finish line. There's a reason why there was absolutely no
last presidential election, they didn't even do primaries.
Democratic process on the Democratic side in 2024, because there's a huge gap between where the Democratic establishment and where the Democratic voters are. Genocide Joe was the popular nickname for Joe Biden amongst left-wingers in this country. And I think there's a huge gap on the Republican side as well. It's kind of consuming the country at this point, that there's this huge like chasm between where the establishments of both political parties are and where the grassroots support from the people.
Yeah, John,
I
want to give
Thomas Massie's much more with the grassroots.
The midterm elections are getting closer, and all this chaos isn't going to help Republicans these days in politics. Scroll through and
mechanics of it, like there are, of course, disputes between who should actually govern the party or lead the party, between maybe a more grassroots Sanders type or maybe a more traditional Clinton type. But ultimately, you cannot exist as a Democrat and express meaningful opposition to the sort of cores of the ideology, which is and you're nodding your head at this. I challenge you, post on social media something in opposition to gay race communism, mass migration.
Joe Manchin opposed him on a lot of shit.
Anti-white discrimination. You literally cannot exist as a prominent Democrat, be it in a position of political office or influence in media, if you are expressing any kind of dissent to what would be referred to, I guess, as woke. That kind
Oh, let's do this. Jews are hated because everyone hates how successful they are. Dave Smithstein. Is that what you think? Yeah, well, it's easy to hate them when we have to pay them an allowance every year. It's really easy to hate them. No one hated the Jews, and I still don't hate the Jews. I hate Israel. But no one even had issues with them until all of this, until we had to go fight another war for them. So that's what causes anti-Semitism, having to be their henchmen. That's what causes it.
kind of stuff.
What
you can
is
say
gay
the more
race
emphasis.
communism?
It's exactly what it sounds like. It is race communism fruited with the kind of LGBT stuff. It is a form of Marxism with places emphasis on race. And then, of course, you've got the LGBT stuff ornamenting that as well.
You don't think that's a bit of a straw man of what the Democratic Party writ large stands for? Gay race communism?
No, I don't. Not at all, actually.
All right. Chris, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, honestly, I'm just a little bit, I mean, I'm obviously over here laughing. I think that's pretty ridiculous. What does that even mean? Gay race, communism, anti-whiteness, these things that don't exist and are just
they do. And it's like
far
the same thing you said with the absurd thing about playing for the Lakers. All you can do is be like, I'm laughing. That's so crazy. Tell me why it's crazy. Tell me how the institutions that are governing the country do not express those.
What you started this whole entire thing with this premise that you can't be a Democrat that you can't be a Democrat and, give meanocratic opposition. It's like opposition to being a Democrat.
I'm not even understanding the argument, because you obviously can't do that when you're a Republican either, because they'll primary you.
Democrat is not, I think white people are oppressed and I hate the LGBTQ plus community. Those are far different than anything relating to the Democratic Party. Those are issues of, I don't know, basic human decency. And so, like,
Right.
I think that you framing
Yeah, I agree with that. Now you're making sense.
this as if there's only these few lanes you can go to be a Democrat and be within this establishment, it's just dishonest. And as Brad said, I think it's straw manning. There's Democrats. I consider myself in between this very like progressive wing. I consider myself a progressive, and this more moderate wing. I often kind of sit in between the two, and I'm just watching. But those two.
Hold up. I wish the Democrats were communists. At least then someone would care about the working class. You think communists care about the working class? How many did they kill under communism? They don't care about anybody either. No one cares about anyone, apparently.
Hold beliefs that are wildly different from each other, and yet try at least to come together and fight against Donald Trump and what we're seeing.
I don't want us to get too derailed here, guys. I'll say I think obviously there's whatever you want to call it, woke, whatever word, there's a social justice ideology. There is a rising socialist camp in the Democratic Party. I don't want to get too boggled down on whether that really constitutes communism. John, what's your actual beef with Thomas Massie? Because when I think of him ideologically, I actually see him as kind of quite MAGA in terms of what he actually stands for and believes. He's got the groups, right? The pro-life groups, the pro-gun groups. He's got the very strong conservative voting record from Heritage Action, Turning Point, a bunch of other conservative groups. What is the gripe? Because the votes where he's broken with Republicans.
It's just because he tried to expose all the kid touchers and he didn't want to go kill innocent people for Israel. That's why. That's like everyone can see this. I don't even know why you have to ask the question.
Tend to be areas where he's outflanking them to the right, yet they want us to believe he's some kind of rhino. What's your issue with him?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's easy to outflank from the right when we're just talking about issues on paper and kind of where we lie politically. I'm not even a Thomas Massie hater per se. I know that there are a lot of people who really go after the guy on Twitter. I'm really not one of those people. My issue with him is really my issue with libertarianism at large, which is why I graduated beyond that when I was maybe 18 or 19, which isn't so much a concern about the principles. Like if Thomas Massie and I are writing down how we think society ought to be governed on a piece of paper, it's really not going to be too different. It's just how do we actually go about actualizing that given our political circumstances? And I just disagree with the strategy of becoming Mr. No and going on leftist media to talk about how you're the only.
He voted for Republican platforms 96% of the time. How is that going against them all the time? They use this to try and justify what they want. They want those Epstein files hidden, and they want us continuously fighting wars in the Middle East to make their 401ks go up and to help Israel. And I'm not on board with that.
Brave, independent person in Congress because you're willing to tell Donald Trump no. And then when it comes time to vote for things like the BBB, which secure the priorities of the administration, you're willing to dissent and say, no, I don't think that actually gets us closer to what we claim we want the country to look like. And so it's not so much an ideological disagreement. I mean, I know he's a libertarian, and I think that libertarians tend to be a little bit more lax on things like immigration and trade policy than perhaps I would be. But it's not even so much that. It just is the strategy and the approach, how he goes about that, which I think is ultimately disrupt.
Massie scares them because he is what Trump pretended to be. He'll get in there, and I think he will go after the actual employers. And that's what scares the shit out of them, because if they did that, immigration would end today. Because we have laws on the books to stop them from hiring illegal immigrants, but we just let them break the law because, they donate to the Trumps and they donate to the Bidens. So we just don't enforce that law. I think Massie will stop all that, and immigration will be 100% better.
To any chance of us winning, and I think it's certainly beneficial to the left, which is why you have the same class of people who celebrated when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, going and waxing poetic about Thomas Massie's integrity. It's completely disingenuous. They recognize about Thomas Massie what so many on the right don't, which is that he is useful not because he furthers the cause of like right-wing politics, but because he disrupts them.
Well, so
when those causes are hiding the names of kid touchers, yes, he disrupts those. That's what I want. I want someone who disrupts the bullshit.
These same people, though, wanted his head on a pike after COVID when he stood up against lockdowns, when he forced votes on COVID spending. So I understand he's gotten some praise from the kind of liberal media institutions or some Democratic friends over the Epstein things or Ron or a few things. But I don't know, Dave. This seems to me like Thomas Massie hasn't changed. The environment around him has.
Yeah. Brad, I used to be a partisan who would just blindly support the president of my party, but then I graduated from that when I was like 7 years old. And so then I went in a different direction. Thomas Massie, I like that the one thing you pointed out that he outflanks them to the right, and the one thing you could point to is he didn't sign on to a giant spending bill that passed anyway. No, what happened here is that Thomas Massie opposed an idiotic, catastrophic war of aggression and a war of choice. And Thomas Massie.
How can you not be a Republican if you don't want to spend a lot of money? I thought conserving meant you conserved money too.
Opposed covering up the Epstein scandal, which really humiliated the administration that had run on that and then done a 180 and then just pathetically tried to bury the thing and claimed it was a Democratic hoax or it didn't exist. Even just a few months before he finally got them to pass the bill, the official position from the Justice Department was that these files don't exist. They're all gone. They came out and openly said that. Then we got 3.5 million of them, and they're just openly, illegally holding back another 3 million of them. That's what got the lobby on his back. And I'm glad you brought up him being opposed to the insane COVID spending that gave us so much of the inflation that got blamed on Joe Biden, but was really actually partially at least responsibility of Donald Trump for passing those dumb spending bills. Thomas Massie was absolutely right and heroic on that, while President Donald Trump made Fauci the national face of the pandemic response and championed lockdowns and mocked the areas that weren't locking down. So I don't know. I don't know. You can just say you graduated from libertarianism and now we're talking about what really, what needs to be implemented to help our society. Well, which one is it? Wars of aggression, burying the Epstein?
Let's grow up like John Doyle and just support people who do shit we don't like. That's the argument here. You're a child if you don't just support the things I like. What a fucking pussy.
Scandal or the COVID lockdowns and the COVID spending. Which one of these things were so wonderful for our society?
John?
I'm not seeing it.
Well, yeah, I'm not going to relitigate the first Trump administration. I certainly wouldn't run it. Right. Well, the second Trump administration, the war. The libertarian types are the same people who will tell you that Congress hasn't declared war since 1942, which is completely true. But then they will act as though, Thomas Massie really posed some kind of threat to whether or not the war in Iran was going to happen or not, when obviously, this is something that the administration could carry out without congressional authorization. So I don't understand how that would really put a target on his back necessarily.
I just don't understand what you're saying there. Libertarians correctly point out that all of these wars are illegal and undeclared, but they also claim Thomas Massie was a threat. It's an incoherent,
if
obviously,
he required
he's not
congressional
a threat to the war.
Right. So then why would that put a target on his back if he was some kind of threat? If his opposition to that would be meaningful, why would that put a target on his back?
If his opposition, I think him embarrassing the administration over the Epstein thing was more the problem. But he also went on Tucker Carlson's show and really broke down how every congressman has an AIPAC handler except him. And then Miriam Adelson poured tens of millions of dollars into his race. So
I do want to come to the Israel
thing. I'm sure it was just a coincidence.
So I'm going to pull up the clip of him mentioning that about his opponent and everything. So let's maybe put a pin in that. John, your response to what Dave just said before that.
There are plenty of Congress people who vocalize opposition to Israel, but they don't get targets the way Thomas Massie did. You can find this with the Squad, for example.
Among Republicans?
Oh, no, I'm talking Congress people, Democrats, Republicans. We have two parties. Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib.
No, we don't. We have one party.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she tweets about AIPAC, and she doesn't really suffer the same consequences politically that Thomas Massie does. So clearly, it's not just an opposition to Israel and America's relationship with Israel. I believe that the problem Thomas Massie faces is that he made a lot of political missteps pertaining to his vocalization of being in opposition to an extremely popular president within Republican voters, and that's why he suffered. So you can make that about Israel or about Miriam Adelson or whatever, but ultimately, when people in Kentucky went to vote him out in his primary campaign, it wasn't because they were running advertisements where he says things that are critical of Israel. Republican voters like Israel, but they don't rank it even within their top 10 issues.
So that's why the billionaires had to go spend all that money. They had to spend millions of dollars, but it's not because he was vocally against them. It wasn't because of that.
Yeah, but that's not the question. The question is, why was Miriam Adelson pumped?
I'm sure Israel cares a lot about Kentucky politics.
Bring all that money in. Yes, I agree with you. They weren't running ad campaigns that just told you what he said. They pretended he was some type of Democrat, even though we've already established at every point he's outflanking you guys to the right. But whatever. The point is that, yes, that clearly there was a concerted effort. They spent more money than any other race in congressional history. So obviously that was for a reason. And for you to just point out, say hey, Miriam Adelson hasn't put as much money into, say, getting rid of Ilhan Omar. That doesn't prove anything. Obviously, Thomas Massie was much more of a threat to the Trump administration because of what me and Brad were just saying. He's outflanking them to the right. He's running as a true America First Republican. And yeah, they saw that as much more of a threat. And that's why the money came down on him. And they're right. He is much more of a threat. If he runs for president in the Republican primary, he's got a great shot of winning.
Well, we can come back to that. I want to play you guys a clip of both Vice President J.D. Vance and President Donald Trump describing their perception of Thomas Massie. Listen to this.
I think the problem with Thomas, and I've told him this in private, and now I guess I'll say it in public, is it's one thing to disagree with the party on a particular issue. It's one thing to to have your independent stand on a number of questions, but that's one thing. Being independent, having your own opinions is one thing. Voting against the party on every single issue, you're eventually going to make.
He voted against the party on 4% of the items that they voted on. 96% of the time he voted with the Republicans. This is a lie. This is programming. This is how they corrupt you. Don't listen to the man. He is a liar, just like his daddy Trump.
Make too many enemies.
Thomas Massie's a terrible congressman. He's been a terrible congressman from day one.
You heard it straight from a terrible president.
Dealing with him is just horrible. I don't think he's a Republican. I think he's actually a Democrat. He's not a libertarian.
Weren't you a Democrat for a long time?
And sometimes they say he's really a Democrat. He votes against us all.
Technically, I think you're still a Democrat. You're still a feminist. You're still a Zionist. You're still a globalist. What the fuck? You got a little bit more conservative with the money so you could spend it all on wars with Iran? How are you not a Democrat?
All the time. He voted against the border wall. He voted against men playing in women's sports. He voted against
when it was pork in another fucking thing.
Gender for everybody. The mutilization of your children. He voted against, again, open borders.
So, guys, I understand that Thomas Massie's been a thorn in the side of President Trump and the administration at times.
None of that was true.
But, and they'd want to get rid of him. It's partisan politics, what have you. But I wish they didn't have to lie about him. The idea that he is voting against the Republican Party on every single issue is objectively not true. Even the statistics that critics of Massie have cited show him still voting nearly 80% of the time with 96. The party this partial term. And when you look at previous terms, it's over 90%. And then to say he supports transgender for everybody or opposes border security just because he voted against the one big beautiful bill. Well, the reason he voted against that was because it raised the debt ceiling by $4 trillion and added trillions of dollars to the debt. That doesn't mean he de facto opposes every single.
That doesn't sound very conservative.
Provision in it. I don't know. To me, this all seems like they say you're allowed to dissent, but then when you actually do so, even in ways where you're more in line with what Trump campaigned on, like actually wanting to release the files or not wanting more wars started overseas, then they still come for your throat anyway. I don't know. Obviously, it's hyperbolic language, Chris, but something about this does give, like, you will not question, dear leader. It does give slightly cultish energy to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a cult. It's a party of personality. You have to, at every single level, being an elected official, you have to give pretty much your soul to Donald J. Trump, both in public and I would argue at some level in private. You have to get on the stage like Thomas Massie's opponent did. And
to be in his party, you have to pretend like men are women, women are men, whatever you think you are, you are. Theirs is a cult too. It's just a different flavor of cult. It's like the Mormons arguing with the Scientologists.
And basically be like, I want to sleep with my, Trump body pillow at night. I love Donald Trump. Questions I get about the war in Iran, just trust Donald Trump. He's resetting the global order. And I mean, this is what we've seen in the Republican Party for 10 years. It's just the reality. I wish more Americans, again, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, up, down, left, right, would just understand that this type of loyalty in politics is so toxic. The idea that if you speak out at all against Donald J. Trump, you're just going to be ostracized. You're going to be called the enemy. You're going to be called a Democrat, similar to now what we see with like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I really strongly dislike Marjorie Taylor Greene. But the idea that all of a sudden she goes against the president and now she's like a Democrat. I'm just watching all this from the background being like, it's like,
right, because that's propaganda. That's not real. She's never been a Democrat. She's not going to be a Democrat. That's just the shit that Trump says whenever he gets stuck and he needs to lie about his former friends.
We told you so. The president, this whole thing's a cult. Can't go against him.
John, do you agree? Do you agree with them like trying to pin just because he voted against the big beautiful bill, which was very big but not so beautiful and was thousands of pages and dumped on them like hours before a vote?
Yep.
Yeah, he voted against that. That doesn't mean he de facto opposes every item in it or supports the things that would have been restricted by it. That seems like a pretty bad faith. I mean, that is how political attacks work, but.
Right, but I just think that's a naive understanding of how our processes are actually conducted. I mean, it's like the same thing with talking about
pivot. What the fuck? No, that is what happened. Why is that naive? What's naive about it? That's exactly what happened.
His voting record, like when, Trump and Vance want to say, oh, he's voting with Democrats all the time. They don't literally mean he's voting with them all of the time, but on issues where maybe it matters a bit more, he's voting with them. Or even, I think he had
it means he's voting with them 4% of the time. So it's a blatant lie.
Highest likelihood of voting with Democrats of any Republican congressman, even if he's still voting with Republicans like 85% of the time or something, he's still defecting at a higher rate. And then two, I'm of the opinion that all of our issues politically are downstream from mass migration. I think that there's been no tool greater to embolden and solidify the Democrat Party than mass migration. I think that insofar as we don't reverse that, anything else we're doing is ultimately futile. And so when I see we have on the table for us the largest increase in border security funding literally ever, to me, like, that's when it's time to kind of like put up or shut up, because if we don't get that under control, then the debt's not going to matter anyway. The deficit's not going to matter anyway, because Democrats will just have permanent political control and they're going to destroy the economy anyway. So I am willing to make that sacrifice, which I agree. I don't think it's pretty, but I'm willing to, actually spend more money if it means part of what we get out of that is the ability to actually preserve the sovereignty of the country so that we do have a window we can work with. Because if we don't have that window, then nothing we're doing is going to matter anyway, because they're just going to win every election. They're going to have the electoral winter.
Have you said that Thomas Massie is an open borders globalist?
Effectively, yeah.
Okay. Well, Dave, I'll let you kind of respond to that. I don't know if voting against the one big beautiful bill, which happens to include a lot of immigration funding among a gazillion other things, de facto means you're an open borders globalist.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's just another lie from the propaganda he's been taking in.
Not de jure, but de facto is key there. In effect, that is what it makes you. You're allied with all the people who are the same.
It's just
no, in no way is it true. It's called a lie. That's what that is. It's a lie. It's bullshit.
Such a weak argument. I don't know. And it's as I know, Brad, because you pay attention to this stuff. One of the things that's interesting about it is it's a particular tactic that Democrats typically use, where they'll attach one thing to a gigantic bill, and then if you're against the bill, they claim, oh, see, you hated this one thing. And obviously, Thomas Massie had always been the guy who wasn't going to vote to add $4 trillion to the debt ceiling. And again, let's poll that issue amongst Republican voters. I think most of them would agree. Why can't we have this as a standalone bill? I mean, the Republicans controlled at the time, they controlled both chambers of Congress. They had the Supreme Court and they have the president. Why can't we just get a standalone immigration bill? Why can't we just get a standalone border security bill? There's no reason that you would have to attach this to $4 trillion of extra spending. Brad, then they're trapping you into either you go along with this or we'll smear you as somebody who's weak on the border. And so anyway, it just doesn't follow. The bottom line here is that they're both just lying about Thomas Massie because he's not going along with the team. But again, even when J.D. Vance gets into like, he votes against us all the time, which is a lie, or when Trump says he's for everyone transing the kids, which is a lie. I mean, the reason they have to say these things is because they sure don't want to actually get into the principle of it and actually tell you what the issues were that he broke with the Republicans and for the Democrats. And I think the bottom line is this. Look, Brett, Donald Trump came to the Libertarian Party. He spoke there and asked for our vote. He tried to be the nominee of the Libertarian Party, actually. They didn't know that that's not how the process works, and it's impossible for him to get it, but that's what he was after. They asked for libertarians to support them, then with promises, including no new wars and releasing the Epstein files. And now not only are they going to completely bail on those promises, but they're going to pour tens of millions of dollars in to unseat the one libertarian member of Congress who is standing up for those things. So if J.D. Vance wants to say, hey, this is just politics, got to vote with the team if you want the team to not spend $32 million to unseat you, well, okay, let's play politics. J.D. Vance has lost my support forever. Now I'm just one guy, but I am fairly influential with some of the most influential people in this country. And so, okay, You guys made your choice. This is politics. You've made an enemy out of the libertarians, and now enjoy how this goes. Enjoy where you have a president with the lowest approval ratings he's ever had. By the way, never a popular president, ever, but he is now the least.
I'll correct that. Right after he got elected with the gunshots and all that stuff, he was really popular for like a couple of weeks when they were saying, I don't think the Democrats will ever win another election. Well, see where we're at now? That's what Zionism turns a good president into. Well, a decent president into.
Popular he's ever been. He's prosecuting the least popular war in American history that is not going very good, and he's about to get destroyed in the midterms. So yeah, great job, Republicans. Great strategy. Go take out the one guy who's beloved by young people and independents and libertarians.
It does raise a question, John, of political capital, right? They've spent all this money and all this energy going after Thomas Massie. And yeah, he voted against them on some things, but it's like, okay, 90, whatever, hundreds of votes, then one nay. Like
sure.
I'm not sure how consequential some of his obstructionism has actually been.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, the point is, like, do you really think this administration's problem is Thomas Massie and it's going swimmingly, and he's the reason that you're not going to be able to achieve like your anti-immigration vision?
Not precisely, no. And I guess to respond to that briefly, I don't really know if I even believe in the principle itself, because you remember also in the first Trump administration, Massie voted against emergency authorization funding for the wall. So that was without the $4 trillion, and he still voted.
We aren't getting the immigration we want because his donors don't want it. They've already said that they want their workers to stay here. So we just have certain industries where it's not. You know, the big campaign contributors, their businesses, we don't take their immigrants. We'll let them keep having that slave labor so that they can compete. But that's why we're not going to have it, because Trump's a sellout.
Voted against that, so he seems to be principally opposed to.
That wasn't a standalone. It was another giant spending bill.
Okay, well, the point being,
the
it doesn't seem,
resolution is what you're talking about.
Yeah, the point being, it doesn't seem that he has this like principle. It's like the ratchet mechanism where it's only a principled stand against something when it actually like helps Republicans win, and then every other time, you know, he can vote like in lockstep with Democrats more or less. But regarding, you know, Thomas Massie,
it's just a lie. It's just not true.
Regarding whether
you
Massie
make stuff up, like.
Nothing I'm saying is incorrect. Literally, none of this is incorrect.
Yes, it is. 96% of the time he votes with the Republican side. What are you talking about voting with Democrats all the time? 4% of the time, they happen to coincide that the Democrats voted for that too. But 96% of the time, he voted with Republicans. So you're lying.
No. Objectively, what you just said is incorrect, that he votes with the Democrats most of the time.
Thomas Massie is the most likely Republican representative to vote with Democrats.
That's a different statement. It's not the factually incorrect one that you just made.
Different bills I would assign different weights to. So effectively, yeah, the guy is a Democrat, which is why, you know, Democrats love him. That's why we have
effectively, because of my mental illness, he's a Democrat.
Democrat influencers praising his integrity.
Heritage Action, Turning Point, the pro-life groups, the NRA all give this guy excellent above average.
They're
Republican
all Democratic
scores.
groups, Brad. Tucker
those are
Democratic.
groups,
he's a Democratic show host, and Candace.
Yeah, those are like the fun wedge
Kelly.
Bumper sticker issues. Those are not the issues that actually decide power. Issues like immigration are far more important for actually deciding who holds power in this country. So insofar as Thomas Massie's weak on that, yeah, at the end of the day, like the guy's basically a Democrat. You know, we can all get up on stage and talk about the right to life or the right to own guns. That's the fun stuff that we argue about at Thanksgiving. What actually decides the composition and political function of the country is the border, is sovereignty, and Massie's weak on that issue.
Pro-life doesn't matter
because of that one bill he wouldn't vote for the pork on, right? The pork in one bill, which was $1 trillion spending bill, he said, no, we're not spending that much. That makes him weak on the border because of that one time that they tried to sneak a bunch of extra spending into a bill, and he said no.
Matter now? It's only immigration?
I thought, and you say I make the straw man's. Every other issue is downstream of immigration. People who are coming into this country from the third world have far more liberal attitudes about literally every policy, including even things like pro-life issues, abortion issues, stuff like that. So yes, insofar as we have more of those people coming into the country, legally or illegally, the Democrat Party is going to have greater room to maneuver and become further left, which is why the country has become so far left in the past 60 years. It's not because the Democrats got better at making arguments, it's because they changed the composition of
Right, it's because the Republicans turned into Zionist shitheads like you and make terrible arguments.
The country to people who are more sympathetic to leftist collectivist attitudes coming